The Morning Majority on 630.
WMAL.
7:07, we have Dan Pfeiffer from the White House. He's the communications director there on the line. And Dan, last night there was a theme to the president's speech. Here's what he had to say repeatedly.
You should pass this jobs plan right away. Pass this jobs bill. Pass this jobs bill. You should pass it right away. Pass this jobs bill. Pass it right away. Pass this
Well,
jobs
I think
bill,
you get the
pass
basic
this
sense
bill,
of what
pass
the
this
message
bill.
was last night, Dan. So my question to you this morning, where can I see the language to this job bill? As the CBO says, you can't score a speech. We need to see the meat on the bones. Where can Americans start to see the details of this plan?
Well, the plan, there are tremendous amount of details on the White House website right now, whitehouse.gov.
Well, those are sort of talking points, aren't they?
No, there's with very specific amounts of money for every single initiative in there. So it's very specific. Having said that, early next week we're going to send up legislation to the Hill. So that they can get working on it right away.
The president said that a week from Monday he will release a more ambitious plan. Why didn't you have the ambitious plan ready when you're standing before Congress and delivering the speech?
Well, what the president was referring to was we have two separate things here. They're related, but they're separate. The first is we have the American Jobs Act the president put forward last night, which will put people back to work, grow the economy, and put more money in workers' pockets. And that's going to be, and that is fully paid for. It doesn't add a dime to the deficit. Second, he's going to put forward a week from Monday his plan to he's going to make recommendations to the super committee that's working on deficit reduction on how he thinks they should reduce the deficit above and beyond the $1.5 trillion that they are required by law to come up with.
All right.
To pay for this bill, but also to do more deficit reduction because we can and should do that.
You basically have laid a lot of this on the super committee. I mean, the president said this will be paid for, and I'll tell you how. He says I'm going to basically let the super committee figure it out. Why didn't you come with specific ideas about how it's going to be paid?
No, we do have the specific idea is that the super committee has to do more deficit reduction.
But you're basically saying, they'll figure it out. You're not saying that you have the plan. You're saying we'll just hand it there. We'll ask them to raise to do the heavy lifting on all this.
A week from Monday, we're going to put forward exactly our recommendation to the super committee, and so that they can begin acting on it is our hope. And the thing is we live in this world where deficit reduction and job creation are either or propositions. That if you have to do deficit reduction, you can't do anything to create the economy, to grow the economy. And our view, and the view of this president, and frankly, every functioning political system in the world, is you have to be able to do both. And that's what the president was talking about last night. It's what he put forward. That's what the American Jobs Act about, and that's what his deficit plan is going to be about as well.
When exactly is the bill created and sent to the Hill?
It'll be sent when they come in next week.
Okay. And on the trade deals, which were mentioned last night, that strikes me as something that could actually perhaps more easily make it through the House, and the president has touted it as something that can create jobs. When might those be sent over?
We're working with Congress on when to send those up. What the president believes is that these trade deals need to be passed very, very soon. We also have an expiring program that helps workers who have lost their jobs because of trade. It's called Trade Adjustment Assistance, and he has been working with the Speaker and Senator Reid and Senator McConnell to get action on that program so that we're doing the right thing, which is it's absolutely right to increase free trade and do it in a fair and equitable way. But there's no question that there's some folks who are dislocated when trade happens, and we'll look after those workers as well.
Now, the president spoke a little bit about green energy, and I assume some of the infrastructure spending that there is in this bill would go towards that. How does the White House assure someone like me or anyone who watched Solyndra fold with $535 million in federally backed loans from the first stimulus? How am I to be assured that that will not happen again? What is the vetting process? How is this not going to be spent irresponsibly?
Well, I think it's important to understand that Solyndra was one of an array of
but it was also a shining example. I mean, that's where Biden spoke. It was touted by the president.
Well, I think the question we're going to have to ask ourselves, because there is inherent risk when you back companies.
Right. That's why I don't like taxpayers taking that risk.
Well, this is the fundamental question you're going to have to ask. It's a choice, and maybe it's a clear and dividing line between the parties, but there are going to be jobs created in clean energy by the country that comes up with the technology first. They're going to be created here. They're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in India. They're going to be created in Germany. So the question is, are we going to be willing to invest in clean energy? And the overwhelming majority of initiatives that came through the same program as Solyndra have done incredibly well. I'll give you an example. Advanced batteries for cars, the batteries that work for fuel-efficient cars. A few years ago, we made 1% of those. The rest of them were made in China and Korea, and they had jobs. They were making money. Because the investments that we have made working with the private sector in that industry, in a few years we'll be making 40% of the batteries around the world. Those are jobs in Michigan. Those are jobs in Ohio. The president has visited some of those plants.
All right, Dan, here's the bottom line for me. Most Americans looked at this last night and said, well, this sounds a lot like what we did in 2009 with the $1 trillion stimulus plan that didn't exactly work. Why is it going to work this time around?
Well, it did work. That is...
Well, unemployment is still at 9%. We thought it was going to be under 8%.
Well,
GDP, we're not growing fast.
Let's talk about the facts. The facts here are, no one had an idea how bad the economy was before the president came in. In the last quarter of 2000, we didn't even know this until a few months ago. No one knew it, not Democrats, not Republicans, independent economists, so they went back and looked. The economy contracted 9% in the last quarter of 2008. So the economy was way worse than it would be. Every economist of any credibility will tell you that the Recovery Act created 3 million jobs, kept us from falling into a depression, and we would be in a terrible place had we not done it. We need to do more. There's no question about it. What this plan will do is it's fully paid for. These are reasonable bipartisan ideas. There was nothing ideological or liberal about hiring, keeping teachers from being laid off. There's nothing ideological or political about rebuilding roads and bridges. So in a different era with a different Republican Party, people will be rushing to support this. And our hope is that people will put politics aside, do what their constituents want, and work with this president to create jobs and grow the economy.
Will we be back a year from now asking for an additional $300 trillion to stimulate the economy?
With this plan will have an immediate impact, will spur job growth. As the president said last night, that Washington is not going to get us out of this mess, but there are things we can do to help. And right now, it would be doing nothing is not an option.
You have in the past, the president last night renewed his call to make millionaires and billionaires pay what he thinks is a more fair share of their taxes. Mm-hmm. And in the past, when you started talking about millionaires and billionaires and we get the details of the plan, it turns out that you're also interested in taxing thousandaires or 100,000aires at a higher rate.
Well,
what's the cutoff going to be here? What are we going to see in that plan?
Let's be very clear. The cutoff has been and has always been that if you make $250,000,
well, that's not a millionaire. That's not a billionaire. That's a guy who owns a business who's trying to create jobs.
98% of small businesses fall below that line.
I think
98.
he's just saying the rhetoric doesn't match what's actually.
But
in
he's
the plan.
talking about millionaires and billionaires, and you're talking about the cutoff being 250,000. That's very different, isn't it?
Majority of that revenue he's talking about is going to come from millionaires and billionaires.
All right, Dan. Well, thanks for coming on again. We always appreciate you.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer from the White House here with the Morning Majority on the president's speech last